We all know Africa for sweeping savannas and legendary wildlife. But Zimbabwe hides waterfall thunder visible from spaced and stone cities built without mortar. Great Zimbabwe's ancient walls still puzzle architects, and Victoria Falls, Mosi-oa-Tunya, creates a spray so vast it forms its own rainforest. Chimanimani's mist-wrapped peaks shelter plants found nowhere else, while Malilangwe quietly brought black rhinos back from the brink. A mist-fed rainforest clings to the cliffs of Victoria Falls, creating a micro-ecosystem so rare it exists in only a handful of places worldwide, right here in Zimbabwe. Do you know that Victoria Falls, or Mosi-oa-Tunya, sprays enough mist to sustain plant species found nowhere else in southern Africa? Far from that thunderous curtain of water, Charara Safari Area unheats as an intimate wild mosaic of riverine forest, mopane woodlands, and baobab-studded plains. Charara sits on the northern boundary of Gonarezhou National Park and serves as one of Zimbabwe's most rewarding places to watch elephant herds follow the Save River. At sunrise, the plains ripple with movement as elephants, buffalo, and grazers cross flood-carved channels beneath earring baobabs. Charara's mix of open savanna and shaded gallery forest concentrates predators and prey, making each game drive feel like a living history of survival. Birdlife here is astonishingly prolific, from raucous trumpeter hornbills to secretive kingfishers that dart along reed-lined lagoons. The Save River itself is a lifeline, drawing herds and offering rare glimpses of river otters and fishing eagles in action. Those corridors are the arteries of survival, connecting Charara to the distant granite kopjes and rivers that sustain life across southeastern Zimbabwe. For visitors, Charara offers a rare balance, wild encounters that feel immediate and personal without the crowds of more famous parks. From baobab-shaded sundowners to silent night drives, the area stitches local tradition and wild abundance into a striking chapter of Zimbabwe's natural story. Local communities around Charara carry knowledge of waterholes and medicinal plants, and increasingly partner with park managers to steward the land. This human-wildlife partnership is what keeps Charara alive, a living example of how people and wildlife can share scarce resources. On granite kopjes across Zimbabwe, stone walls rise taller than any pre-colonial structure in southern Africa. Do you know that the Great Zimbabwe Ruins sit on those granite islands, mingling massive masonry with natural rock? Built between the 11th and 15th centuries without mortar, its dry stone walls curve with precise craft. Builders stacked stones so perfectly the walls have endured for centuries with little repair. The great enclosure and conical tower were more than fortifications. They announced royal authority and ritual space. Carved soapstone birds and ornaments held symbolic power, linking kings to ancestors and the spirit world. Excavations uncovered Indian Ocean beads, Persian pottery, and Chinese celadon, proving far-reaching trade ties. Great Zimbabwe was a mercantile capital, controlling gold routes that fed coastal markets and distant empires. European travelers once denied its African creators, inventing foreign builders until archaeology corrected the record. That correction transformed Great Zimbabwe into a symbol of indigenous statecraft and modern national identity. The ruins show planned neighborhoods, workshops, and cattle enclosures, evidence of organized urban life and economy. Radiocarbon dates and oral traditions now map a timeline of kings, artisans, and long-distance merchants. Later centers like Kami echoed Great Zimbabwe's forms, spreading its influence across the region. Following those echoes reveals migration paths, shifting capitals, and evolving political systems in southern Africa. Visiting today, you face unanswered questions about workforce, ritual practice, and how urban life was organized. In the next segment, we will trace Great Zimbabwe's connections to coastlines, trade winds, and distant dynasties. Prepare to have entrenched assumptions challenged as we uncover artifacts that rewrite regional history. Great Zimbabwe's stones still speak if we know how to listen. Chimanimani Mountains hold one of the planet's rare quartzite massifs, where flat-topped peaks and deep clefts support endemic alpine bogs. Do you know Chimanimani's Bridal Veil and Echo Falls pour from ancient plateaus into hidden plunge pools that feed rivers used for generations? Cloud forest pockets cling to steep slopes, sheltering orchids, proteus, and beetles found nowhere else on Earth. From these ridges you can follow a green corridor, linking Chimanimani to Nyanga and the broader Eastern Highlands, crossing Zimbabwe into Mozambique. Local communities name each peak and valley, and their oral maps guide researchers to microhabitats and species unknown to science until recently. Scientists catalog rare amphibians and tiny sunbirds adapted to cliff life, and they trace how isolated populations respond as climates warm. High-altitude peatlands here act as living sponges, regulating streams that sustain farms and wildlife far below. Moss carpets fed by fog host minute frogs and liverworts that survived past climatic shifts, making Chimanimani a refuge for survivors. Rock tours and sculpted gullies whisper of long geological histories, offering clues to ancient weathering and the forces that shaped southern Africa. Hikers moving from ridge to valley encounter ruined huts, wartime relics, and solitary stands of rare lilies woven into local stories. Cross-border conservation projects now map corridors to keep species moving between Zimbabwe and Mozambique as pressure on land increases. Protecting Chimanimani is not just about scenery. It preserves water, culture, and species whose futures depend on connected, cared-for landscapes. Walk one trail with us, and you'll discover the tiny frog and the single endemic flower that encapsulate the mountain's fragile resilience. Nestled in the mist-soaked peaks of the Eastern Highlands, Zimbabwe's Vumba Botanical Gardens protect one of the world's rare mist forests, harboring endemic ferns, cycads, and orchids. Do you know Vumba's trails wind through ancient rhododendrons and giant tree ferns, where species survive that are extinct in many nearby regions? This living museum was carefully cultivated in the early 20th century and now shelters over 1,000 plant varieties, each with its own secret ecology. Visitors follow narrow paths past shaded ponds and exotic camellias. But the true spectacle is the microclimate that keeps delicate highland species thriving. Birdsong is constant here, with rarities like the Shallow's turako and the Miombo tit fluttering among mist-laden canopies. Even moths and beetles unique to the Eastern Highlands play roles in this fragile web, pollinating flowers that bloom only in Vumba's fog. Beyond the formal beds, moss-clad cliffs and hidden ravines host liverworts and orchids that scientists still catalog, some discovered in the last decade. Local guides point out medicinal plants used by communities for generations, linking conservation to living cultural knowledge. In autumn, the hills blaze with colors as azaleas and wildflowers carpet the slopes, offering a living palette few expect in Zimbabwe. Walkers often end their route at Lady's Seat and Bridal Veil Falls, vantage points that reveal how Vumba spills into neighboring forest reserves. These corridors are vital, connecting Vumba to the larger Eastern Highlands network, including Nyanga and Chimanimani, allowing wildlife to move and means to flow. Preservation here is not just botanical pride. It's a strategic lifeline for species facing climate shifts and habitat fragmentation. Every bench and greenhouse whispers stories of botanists and local custodians who saved rare seedlings from extinction. As we leave Vumba's shaded groves, the trail continues toward misty ridgelines, where the next chapter of the Highlands' natural story unfolds. Their work reminds us that a garden here is also an archive, preserving genetic libraries for future restoration projects. And behind each labeled specimen lies a network of farmers, seed savers, and researchers whose quiet collaboration keeps Vumba vibrant. In the quiet dawn, the gardens feel like a church of leaves, where every dew droplet reflects an entire ecosystem's resilience. Stay with the thread from Vumba to the highland peaks, and you will see why this small botanical haven matters far beyond its stone walls. Bubi Mountains hold one of Zimbabwe's last high-altitude cloud forest pockets, hanging like a green crown over ancient granite tors. Do you know that the Bubi Mountains harbor plant species found nowhere else on Earth? Tiny survivors of an older climate. Clad in mist at dawn, these ridges trap moisture and create microhabitats where orchids, ferns, and succulent herbs persist in near isolation. Local communities still use some of those herbs for medicinal rituals, preserving knowledge that predates colonial maps. Trails along the ridgelines reveal stone formations polished by millennia of wind and caves that whisper with human stories. Archaeologists have found scattered artifacts and rock shelters nearby, hinting at seasonal hunters who once moved between Bubi and the lowlands. The mountains feed streams that stitch the landscape together, flowing down to meet the larger river systems and the wetlands beyond. Those waterways link the Bubi Highlands to the great wildlife corridors of western Zimbabwe, creating lifelines for elephants, antelope, and migratory birds. Birdwatchers prize the Bubi Range for rare montane species and for migrants that stop here after long journeys across the continent. At dusk, the sky swarms with bats and moths, tiny engines of pollination that keep pockets of rare flora alive. Guides who grew up in the Bubi foothills lead visitors not just to scenic overlooks, but to stories, medicinal use, wartime hideouts, and secret foraging saws. Their narratives show how landscape, language, and livelihood are braided together in ways that travel guides rarely capture. To truly understand Zimbabwe, you must follow these upland streams as they descend, connecting Bubi's quiet resilience to the wider tapestry of rivers, ruins, and reserves. Only then does the Bubi Mountains' role become clear, a living archive that quietly guards species, stories, and survival strategies for the nation. Visiting today offers a chance to support those community conservation projects and to witness how fragile ecosystems can be nurtured back from the brink. Make the journey from Bubi toward Matobo, and you'll see how each ridge, ruin, and river remembers a chapter of Zimbabwe's unfolding story. Malilangwe Wildlife Reserve shelters one of the last privately protected populations of black rhino in southern Africa. Do you know that Malilangwe's granite ridges and hidden river gorges hold sand rock art panels older than many modern states? Here, privately funded conservation and local communities have rebuilt an entire ecosystem, bringing back species that vanished from the landscape. Every dry season island of water around the Malilangwe Dam becomes a lifeline for elephants, painted wolves, and migrating birds, concentrating life in improbable abundance. Walk the riverine forests, and you find ancient baobabs with hollow trunks used by generations of people and predators alike. Look deeper, and you discover one of the reserve's secrets. Deliberate reintroductions have restored predators and prey in a choreographed balance rarely seen in privately managed lands. Researchers here track cheetahs racing across open valleys, collaring wild dogs that map territories like social cartographers, and monitoring rhino calves born into safety. That science is married to local voices, with community-run programs that share tourism revenue, teach anti-poaching skills, and revive traditional knowledge tied to the land. The landscape itself is a patchwork: mopane woodlands, sandstone kopjes, and the shimmering surface of the Malilangwe reservoir, each habitat folding into the next. Those folds create corridors that, seasonally, lead wildlife toward Gonarezhou and the broader Save River system, stitching private reserve to national park in living continuity. Hidden beneath the gravel and river sand are archaeological traces and rare plant communities that botanists travel across continents to study. Visitors who come expecting standard safari tropes leave with a different story, one of long-term recovery, adaptive management, and the fragile triumph of collaboration. Malilangwe's model shows how targeted investment, science, and local stewardship can rewrite extinction narratives and reconnect fragments of a dying wilderness. Salisbury Kopje rises like a granite heart in the center of Charara, its weathered boulders holding centuries of hidden stories. Do you know Salisbury Kopje shelters ancient iron-smithing pits, colonial relics, and the earliest footprints of the city now called Charara? Walk its slopes, and you can trace layers of time, where indigenous communities once gathered and early settlers established the seed of a capital. Its summit overlooks the green expanse that became Charara Gardens, and every stone seems to whisper names of markets, ceremonies, and forgotten paths. Archaeologists have found pottery shards and metalwork here that connect this kopje to wider trade routes across the plateau, hinting at networks older than colonial maps. From this small rocky spine, you can imagine caravans moving toward Great Zimbabwe, and the kopje becomes a miniature compass pointing to inland kingdoms. In colonial times, the kopje was repurposed as a lookout and later a symbol of civic life. Its silhouette, etched in postcards and protest banners alike. Today, local guides thread oral histories between monuments and modern shops, making Salisbury Kopje a living classroom that bridges Mbare's markets and the National Gallery's galleries. If you stand at dawn, the city's bustle folds away, and bird calls fill crevices where once fires burned, offering an intimate counterpoint to Harare's leafy avenues. This is a place where geology and memory combine, each rock a page that pulls you toward the wider story of Zimbabwe's past and present. As we move from Salisbury Kopje's granite ridges to the nearby avenues and finally toward the distant silhouette of Great Zimbabwe, the connections become impossible to ignore. Each step here seeds the curiosity that will carry you deeper into the highland plateaus, where stone keeps rewriting human stories. Salisbury Kopje keeps speaking. Gonarezhou National Park is a vast, seldom visited sanctuary known locally as the Place of Elephants, where massive herds roam across Mopani plains and sandstone escarpments. Its most dramatic landmark, the Kilojo Cliffs, rise in rust-red walls that glow at sunset, a geological spectacle sculpted over millions of years. Here the Save River threads through deep gorges and carved floodplains, providing life-giving water that shapes seasonal migrations and secret watering holes. The park's isolation has preserved ancient baobabs and rare rock art, whispering stories of human and animal coexistence that few outside the region have witnessed. Gonarezhou's elephant population is unique for its size and social structures, with matriarchal herds traveling long distances in search of mineral-rich soils. Conservation efforts have reintroduced species like black rhino and fostered cross-border wildlife corridors, linking Gonarezhou to Mozambique and the greater Great Limpopo landscape. Bird life here is astonishingly diverse, from raptors patrolling thermals above cliffs to secretive marsh birds in the Save's backwaters, attracting dedicated avian researchers. Nightfall reveals an incomparable sky, where constellations seem closer and predators' calls stitch the dark, testifying to an ecosystem that functions largely unchanged. Access requires patience. Narrow tracks and seasonal bridges filter visitors to a few privileged observers, ensuring encounters remain intimate rather than crowded spectacles. Encounters with the local Shangaan communities add cultural depth, their knowledge of the land and its rhythms, guiding conservation and storytelling alike. From the red cliffs to the riverine forests, every stretch of Gonarezhou connects to neighboring parks, forming a lifeline for migratory species across national borders. Next, we will cross into the Lowveld, tracing animal trails and uncovering human histories woven into these wild corridors. We will follow a herd at dawn, tracking footprints and watermarks that reveal long-hidden migratory strategies. Land that looks empty on maps is a living archive of survival and quiet resilience. Hidden in north-central Zimbabwe, the Bindura grasslands preserve one of the world's rare lowland Miombo grassland mosaics that thrive on ancient, nutrient-poor soils. Do you know Bindura grasslands erupt each wet season into a surreal mosaic of wildflowers, so dense they change the color and scent of the air? Beneath those carpets lie intricate termite cities and sun-baked pans that shape water, toil, and life across the plains. These features create tiny wetlands after rains that host rare amphibians and invertebrates found nowhere else in the country. Herds of impala and eland haunt the long grass, but the real surprise is the number of secretive birds and predators that use the grasses as cover. Migratory raptors make the skies above Bindura a seasonal highway where kestrels, harriers, and sometimes endangered vultures ride thermals for miles. Local communities have tended this landscape for generations, using patch fires and grazing patterns that keep diversity high and woody plants in check. That human management unwittingly helped protect species and preserved a mosaic that scientists now value as a living laboratory. Walk the rim of a termite mound, and you can trace a green vein pushing toward the distant Mavuradonha Mountains, where rock and grass meet. This seamless corridor links the open plains to granite outcrops and woodlands, allowing animals and plants to migrate, adapt, and survive across seasons. In the shoulder months, secret pools glitter with dragonflies and frogs, whose life cycles sync with rhythms older than any map. Botanists visiting Bindura sometimes find plants thought extinct from nearby regions, clinging to microhabitats carved by wind and fire. The grasses themselves harbor tiny economies of life, root fungi, hidden pollinators, and nocturnal rodents that keep the whole system humming. When wind sweeps the plains, it carries not only seeds but legends, stories of vanished herds and ancient roots, now traced by researchers. Protecting Bindura means protecting a rare form of Africa's savanna that stitches together highlands and lowlands into a larger ecological whole. Bridal Veil Falls forms one of the planet's rare moonbow theaters, where the Zambezi spray turns silver under a full moon. Do you know Bridal Veil Falls sometimes remains the last flowing ribbon of the Zambezi during the late dry season, nurturing a rainforest that survives on mist alone? Unlike the thunderous roar of the main cataract, Bridal Veil is a delicate, lacy curtain that threads water through cracks in ancient basalt. That slender flow scours hidden pools and carves miniature grottos where orchids and ferns cling to wet rock faces. Local storytellers say those grottos are doorways between worlds, and the constant vapor has allowed unique mosses and insects to evolve in isolation. Scientists have found tiny endemic invertebrates on the spray-saturated cliffs that you won't encounter anywhere else in Zimbabwe. When the wind shifts, Bridal Veil disappears into a ghostly mist and reassembles meters downstream, rearranging the show's choreography overnight. Visiting Bridal Veil is like reading a footnote to Victoria Falls, small in scale, but essential to the full story of the Zambezi's power. Stay close enough to feel the spray, and you'll understand how fragile and persistent these linked landscapes truly are. Photographers linger until moonrise, hoping for that lunar rainbow that only a handful of places on Earth can produce. And Bridal Veil's spray is central to that rare spectacle. In the next segment, we'll cross to the mainland paths, where local guides reveal how human rituals and river rhythms have intertwined with Bridal Veil for generations. From the thunderous spray of Victoria Falls to the quiet, wind-sculpted granite of the Matobo Hills, Zimbabwe holds landscapes found nowhere else on Earth. We traced the Zambezi's silver thread through floodplains, listened to elephants at Hwange, and watched hippos carve nightly paths in mana pools. We moved from the carved memory stones of Great Zimbabwe to the mist-washed rainforests of the Eastern Highlands, each place a chapter in the same living story. Along the way, we discovered secret wetlands where migratory birds stage impossible comebacks and indigenous artisans who keep ancient techniques alive. What ties these places together is not only geography, but resilience, ecosystems and cultures that have endured pressures and, against expectation, continue to flourish. Every limestone cave, river bend, and ruined wall holds small surprises, an endemic plant, a passed-down song, a craft method that dates back centuries. If you leave Zimbabwe with one memory, let it be the sense that everywhere here, there is an invitation to look closer and to listen harder. The country doesn't give itself up at first glance. Its rewards are hidden in plain sight for those willing to follow the river, climb the ridge, or ask for a story. So carry these scenes with you, from falling water to quiet ruins, and let them change the way you measure Zimbabweanness, history, and modern creativity. And when you return home, the questions will stay with you. Which landscapes will we protect next, and whose voices will we make room for in the story of this land?